Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to the December edition of my 2017 One Month to a More Effective Compliance Program podcast series, where each month I take a deep dive into a specific part of a best practices compliance program. In the month of December, I'm taking a deep dive into better written standards, which form the very backbone of your compliance program. Written standards include codes of conduct, policies, and procedures, and we're going to be taking a very deep dive into the design of all of these, training, and revising and updating. We'll also take a look at the information communicated by the Department of Justice on what specific policies should be included in your best practices compliance program, including policies on gifts, travel, business entertainment, charitable donations, facilitation payments, third parties, and cybersecurity. We'll also take a look at certain enforcement actions and opinion releases to see what other information we can glean from these. My sponsor this month is my Doing Compliance Masterclass. We recently concluded the first masterclass in November 2017. I'm co-hosting this with Jonathan Marks at Markham LLC. We will be putting on a full series of classes in 2018. Check back for details. This month's podcast series will give you information which will allow you to set up the very foundation of your compliance program. My podcast series on 1 month to a more effective compliance program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Day 11, Policies and Procedures on Travel. The Greek ruler Draco received some very bad PR advice over the centuries. After all, it is his name which is the root word for our word draconian. Draco is credited with committing to writing the first Athenian code of laws. The laws of Athens previously had been passed along through oral tradition and administered in a quite arbitrary manner. Under Draco's code, the prior oral laws, which were known only to a special class of aristocrats and were arbitrarily applied and interpreted, were recorded and made known to all literate citizens. Today, Draco is remembered for the harshness of his code, not for the innovation in recording it. Yet that's exactly what leads to today's podcast of 1 month to better written standards, policies and procedures. Prior to the 2012 FCPA Guidance, the DOJ issued 2 opinion releases in 2007, which offered guidance to companies considering whether to, and if so, how to, incur travel and lodging expenses for government officials. Both of these opinion releases laid out specific representations made to the DOJ, which led to the Department approving the travel to the U.S. by foreign government officials. These facts provided strong guidance to any company which seeks to bring foreign government officials or employees of state-owned enterprises to the United States for legitimate business purposes. In Opinion Release 0701, the company desired to cover the domestic expenses for a trip of a 6-person delegation of the government of an Asian country for educational and promotional tour of one of the company's U.S. operations. The representations made by the requester of the opinion release were as follows. Number 1, a legal opinion from an established U.S. law firm stating that the payment of the expenses by the U.S. company did not violate the local laws of the country involved. 2, the U.S. company did not select the foreign officials who would come to the U.S. for the training program. 3, the delegates who came to the United States did not have direct authority over the decisions relating to the company's products or services. 4, the company would not pay the expense of anyone other than the selected official. 5, the officials would not receive any entertainment other than room and board from the company. And 6, all expenses were accurately recorded in the company's books and records. The DOJ said they would not institute an FCPA action. In Opinion Release 0702, the company desired to pay domestic expenses for a trip within the U.S. by 6 junior to mid-level officials of a foreign government for an educational program at the requester's U.S. headquarters. The representations made to the DOJ were as follows. The company would not pay travel expenses or fees for participation in the program, which was a 6-week training program of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. The company had no non-routine business in front of the foreign government agency involved. The routine business it did have before the foreign government was guided by administrative rules with identified standards. The U.S. company would not select the delegates for the training. The U.S. would only host the delegates and not their families. The U.S. company would pay all costs incurred directly to U.S. service providers and provide a modest daily minimum to the foreign government officials based upon a properly presented receipt. Any souvenirs presented would be of modest value with the company's logos. There would be one 4-hour sightseeing trip in the city where the U.S. company was located, and the total expenses of the trip were reasonable for such a trip, and the training would be provided at the home offices of the U.S. company. Once again, the DOJ declined to prosecute. So what can we glean from these two opinion releases? Based upon them, it would seem that a U.S. company can bring foreign officials to the U.S. for a legitimate business purpose. A key component is that the guidelines are clearly articulated in a company's policies on travel for government officials. Based upon these two opinion releases, here are the suggestions I have for policy on travel for foreign government officials. Number one, any reimbursement for airfare will be at economy class. 2, do not select the particular officials who will travel. The decision should be made solely by the foreign government. 3, only host the designated officials and not their spouses or family members. 4, pay all costs directly to service providers as possible. In the event that an expense requires reimbursement, you may do so, but only up to a modest daily minimum, here between $35 and $50, and the presentation of a receipt. 5, any souvenirs you provide the visiting officials should reflect the business or logo and would be of nominal value. 6, apart from the expenses identified, do not compensate the foreign government officials for their visit. Do not fund, organize any other side trips or leisure activities. And then finally, the training expenses will be only necessary and reasonable to educate the visiting officials about the operations and or services of your company. Incorporation of these concepts into a compliance program is a good first step to preventing any FCPA violations from arising, but once again, it must be emphasized they are only a good first step. The guidelines must be coupled with active training of all personnel on the corporate and individual consequences that may arise. Lastly, it's imperative that such travel be properly recorded on your books and records. The 2012 FCPA guidance did give us some specific types of improper travel and entertainment that just are too good to pass up. Number one, a $12,000 birthday trip for a foreign government official who was decision maker that included visits to wineries and dinners, $10,000 spent on dinners, drinks, and entertainment. A trip to Italy for 8 Iraqi government officials that consisted primarily of sightseeing and included $1,000 a day in pocket money. Finally, a trip to Paris for a government official and his wife consisted primarily of touring via chauffeur-driven limos. So what are today's 3 key takeaways? Number one, gifts and business, or rather travel, continues to plague companies for compliance violations. 2, as with gifts and entertainment, the key is not simply having a policy and procedure in place, but following it. And 3, you have to have a proper oversight process. This is Tom Fox. I hope you've enjoyed day 11 of 1 month to better written standards, and I hope you'll join me tomorrow for day 12. This is Tom Fox again. Thank you for listening to this episode of 1 month to better written standards in a compliance program. I hope you'll join me tomorrow for another episode. If you have listened to this podcast on iTunes, I would ask that you would rate our podcast, as it would help in our rankings and also help get the word out about the only daily podcast which will give you a hint or tip to improve your compliance program. Also, if you have any questions, you can email me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. This is Tom Fox. Thank you again for listening. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. My podcast series of 1 month to a better compliance program is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.